Okay, everybody, good evening and welcome to the March 12th, 2025 meeting of the Wilmington School Committee. All members are in attendance. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the Student Representative Report from Wilmington High School. Shubangi, when you are ready, thank you for joining us.
Hello everyone, my name is Shubangi. Thank you for having me again. Starting off, Saturday, March 1st, the Wilmington High School Model UN Club traveled to BC High in Dorchester to participate in the 33rd Annual Model UN Conference. Notably, Evander Ragsdale won a People's Choice Award for an amazing performance in the Star Wars Committee. Other committee topics included the 2028 Olympic Games, the 2008 financial crisis, and the Israel-Palestine crisis. This past weekend, the Massachusetts DECA State Career Development Conference took place in Boston's Seaport District. The weekend was filled with competition, networking with students from across the state, dinners, votings, and more. 27 Wilmington High School DECA students attended. Congratulations to Gavin Dong for entering the top test score, and to Spencer Bagtas, Dean Champa, Josie O'Mahony, and Jill Weinstein for making it to the finals. This past weekend, Ms. Dunlap's marketing students visited Gillette Stadium and the Hall of Fame to learn about brand creation and marketing strategies. The Wilmington Sons and Daughters of Italy generously voted to provide Wilmington High School's Italian students with $300 to help cover transportation costs for their upcoming field trip to Boston. The Wilmington High School robotics team recently won the Battle of Lexington and set the state record for the highest scoring point total in the competition. This achievement qualified them for the state championship, where they competed this past week. In addition, the team hosted a session at the Wilmington Memorial Library to demonstrate their robot and discuss their team's work. On March 3rd, the World Cultures Club hosted a Mardi Gras meeting where students learned about the holiday and enjoyed a king cake, with one lucky student finding the hidden baby Jesus. The club is also hosting a special cultural festival on March 13th, featuring food, dancing, and prizes. Tickets are $5 and will be available at the door. This past week, the Wilmington High School Chess Club hosted an intense school tournament that ended in a three-way tie, with the winners being Jay Cronin, Ajay Gupta, and Jay Karani. In sports, the Wilmington High School cheer team won the Division III state championship and celebrated with a special breakfast at the high school alongside Wilmington High School staff. Additionally, Eva Bedreau recently committed to Bridgewater State University to continue her basketball career. This past week, the athletic department also held an informational meeting for upcoming freshmen and their parents to introduce spring athletic programs and provide opportunities for students to connect with teammates. Do you have any questions?
Questions, comments?
Thank you very much again. It's phenomenal to hear about the cheerleaders and their accomplishments and all the other activities.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shubangi.
Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda. We will take several of these items individually. But first, we have approval of minutes, February 26, 2025. Is there a motion? Dr. McCaldy, second. Dr. Bryson, all those in favor? Unanimous. We have approval of grants for the World Language Program enhancement of $11,814. Is there a motion? Mr. Ragsdale, is there a second? Mr. Samaha, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Fantastic.
We have approval, acceptance of DESE grant FC 0436 in the amount of $15,000 and FC 422A in the amount of $35,000. And I believe Ms. Vluk and Ms. Kim are here. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Hello. So Ms. Kim and I have been working
quite a bit this year on applying to DESE's Innovation Career Pathways. And so it's been a lot of connecting the dots between the academics that we offer here at the high school and our internship program that we have our seniors go through. And so we're applying into two different pathways. I'm applying into the business and finance pathway, and Ms. Kim is applying into, she has two pathways for life science and environmental. And so what it looks like is that students are required by DESE to take, once we're accepted into the program, 4 technical courses and 2 advanced courses, followed by 100 hours of an internship. We already have most of these courses pieced together. We already have the internship program, so we're kind of finalizing and formalizing a lot of things. So for the business and finance pathway, I think I put in your packets my little spreadsheet of what that might look like. So for technical courses, we're required to have year-long courses. So instead of 2 year-long courses, we're going to have to do 4 semester courses based on our electives. So we would require all students to take Introduction to Business, all students interested in this pathway, Intro to Business and the new Google certifications classes. And then they can kind of pick their focus, whether they want to do business, marketing, finance. They could pick and choose amongst any of those, but if somebody's got a particular interest, they can do a focus. So for example, if somebody's really interested in marketing, they can take Ms. Dunlap's Sports and Entertainment Marketing course, Digital Marketing, Service Learning. And then DESE requires 2 advanced courses, and that's where the AP courses come into play. I know I saw a question from Mr. Smaha about dual enrollment. Several schools around us offer like a concurrent enrollment, take it at the high school, but get school credit. You talked to Ms. Dickerson about that, so I'll let you talk to that as to why we looked into it, but then we decided against it. I think it just didn't make financial sense.
Yeah, do you want to repeat what your question was so that everybody knows?
Yeah, so one of the, when I was looking through the materials, one of the requirements is advanced courses. And so there's a couple different ways that schools can meet that requirement by DESE. One of them is through AP, which is what you suggested. And then the other one is through some sort of, dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, early college. All these names are kind of related. And so I was just curious what, if you had considered that as, as another path. The high school that I teach at, we have dual enrollment, so I find that to be a really important and beneficial way for kids to get credit and get exposure to, while AP courses are great and rigorous, they're not necessarily the same exact thing as a college course. So I was just curious about it.
Yeah, so we looked into it for UMass Lowell because it's the closest school here. It just didn't make financial sense because now that tuition and courses are getting more expensive, it actually would be cost prohibitive for a lot of our students and then even to support it. So I think we're still looking at other options. A lot of the courses that they want us to create the technical courses are also considered advanced courses. So it doesn't necessarily have to have an AP designation.
Okay.
Right, and Wilmington actually has the most number of AP science courses around. So we recently this year launched AP Environmental Science with 2 classes running. And so these pathways actually just really connected all the dots. So for science, we're gonna do a life science pathway, which will end in AP Bio and one other. And then the environmental pathway will end in AP Environmental Science, and then another AP level science. We also offer AP Chem, AP Physics 1, and AP Physics 2. So there's lots of options. If anything, we just don't have enough time for all the kids to focus.
Yeah,
The cool thing about this grant is that it connected us with Mass Hire, so that now will give us entryway into some of the technical fields, like in the biotech field, where a lot of businesses are really hesitant to have students be interns, but with support of the Mass Hire people, then we can get access into people and companies so that they can take a bigger risk. And so our senior internship program will actually be more robust, right? And I've already have 3 contacts for the life sciences, environmental science, so with the trustees and even a veterinary hospital. And so it's been pretty exciting how all the pieces are kind of falling into place, and we're like, oh, we have this. We already do this. Oh, we just launched this. So
Yeah.
so that's why we just, and then all the money keeps on just falling in our lap. So we're like, how can we say no, right?
So to differentiate the two grants, so there were two grants. The first one, the $15,000, was to fund the writing of the applications. So Ms. Kim and I have spent well over 150 hours each writing our separate applications to the state for these programs. Ms. Dickerson has also been involved because there's a portfolio MyCap piece that needs to be involved for this. And then Mr. Staffier has been involved as he's in charge of the internship program at the high school. So that's to kind of fund the writing of this in the application. There was an application to be invited to apply to the program, so that was part A. And then we had to write part B, which was much lengthier. So now we're waiting to see if we're invited to interview, which is supposed to be any day now. So we're waiting to hear on that. The second one is a little bit different. I received an email direct from DESE saying, congratulations, here's $35,000. Can you fill out this application as a formality? So while I haven't gotten the approval through the application system, I got the email direct from our contact with this program that said, this is your entitlement grant, here is your money, please fill out the application. So that's why I put that on for the agenda too, because I figured, well, we're here talking about it, I might as well. That money is to fund some of the equipment to get these programs up and started. So while, at least for the business pathway, we intended to roll out for the 26-27 school year, starting with those freshmen, there are things that we want to get for our departments to get this up and running. So, for example, Miss Dunlap needs new laser printers for her marketing classes, marketing materials. Some of our teachers, the AP Stats teachers, Mr. Kinney teaching AP Micro and Macro, would like graphing calculators for their students to have in the classroom. Miss Kim has teachers that, there are sensors for the environmental science that are quite a bit of money that this could go towards funding, so.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Other questions or comments? Mr. Turner? I thought I'd call on you because I figured, based on your reaction, you had something.
Is it a good sigh or is
Oh,
it
it's a very good
bad?
sign. This
Oh.
is phenomenal. It's, and part of why it's phenomenal is well, there's three reasons. One, to your point, so much of this is existing and is connecting dots. We've done a lot with the curriculum, going back to some of the computer science programs and all these things we've added, the environmental science AP. That's fantastic. And then the level of effort you've put into this already is amazing and appreciated. And again, it's the same thing you've been doing with other things, creating new curriculum for our program of studies. And then it takes these things the next step. And then, yes, to receive $50,000 worth of grants is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. The only question I would have is you mentioned that the rollout is 26, 27. To the extent that some of the curriculum is already there, students who are already here will benefit from the curriculum that's there, but mostly it's a forward-looking thing for incoming freshmen to take them through the entire program.
So
Go ahead.
I'll answer that. So I think in the business program, there's some advanced courses that need to be written. I'm ready to go starting in the fall, but I jump in, so I'm like, why not?
We also, when we were
Yeah.
applying for Part A back in October, we didn't know where this was going to go. So, where I was like, let's give ourselves another year to make sure that we've got everything in place. Like Ms. Kim said, the business and finance, there are a couple of new courses coming down the pipeline. There's a new AP Business Principles that's coming out the year after next. We've talked about implementing an Accounting 2 course to get QuickBooks certifications. So those for this pathway need to be developed a little bit more, but some of the sciences are ready to go for the next year. We are required to have an application process. That's a part of the requirement from DESE. So we need to work with our counseling department on what does that look like? How do we roll that out to students? And then just speaking to what you said about computer science, there are additional pathways. We were required as a part of the first-time application to apply into one of 6 high-needs areas. Unfortunately, we don't have automotive at Wilmington High School, but we did have these departments. Computer science is one that I would like to apply into in the future, should we get this designation. And I'm sure there are others as well, so.
The one last thing, when we were discussing with Mr. Gendron on the program of studies, there's business classes in several of the different departments today, and part of what I was suggesting and encouraging then was just to maybe rethink. There's
organization.
logic why they are where they are, but some coordination amongst them, and I think this is a great way to leverage coordination amongst them, and regardless of where they sit and whatnot, but a comprehensive sort of business program could come out of this that would be really, really helpful, I think.
We both agree. we all agree. It's just a matter of having the leverage. And then in terms of the pathways, if you notice how the students start, it actually gives us, even if we roll it out, say in the fall, it'll give us at least 2 years, if not 3, to kind of get all our ducks in order. My biggest concern is just having enough industry specific places where we can place our students, or places where they can do their capstone. And so that was, always my focus, because a lot of biotech companies and science companies, they're privileged. They don't want, a lot of it's confidential, or they're just high level, so they're not gonna just let any student, come in and work with them, right? And leak privileged information or whatever. Any other questions?
I'm sorry. I just want to compliment these ladies, because they, Mr. Gendron mentioned this in our meeting on a Monday afternoon, and then, so they are like looking at it, Googling it, and they're like, oh, the deadline is like right around the corner, and the two of them just jumped in head first, took this on committed to it without even really knowing what they were getting into, and just knew that this was good for Wilmington High School, and really jumped in, did the work, and then went, oh my gosh, this is a lot of application process, and did a fantastic job getting it done. So really appreciate your efforts, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Samaha.
And I want to say thank you too. And I hope that my question just about the college part didn't sound critical.
Oh, no.
I wasn't coming across critical, because I think this is fantastic, and I really appreciate it. And I think it's the right step for Wilmington. So thank you very much for pursuing this.
Thank you. Dr. McCall.
Yep, just a comment, because my questions were already answered, so thanks for the good explanation. Really like seeing the life sciences track. I happen to work in that field and everything, so
You want to host any students?
Gonna say,
I'm already
There's your
reaching out.
connection.
I heard biotech is the field, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm in a unique situation, but I know people, so you can talk to me offline.
Throw that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Others? Mr. Golden.
I'll say thank you, and for all your hard work. Grant writing was wicked tough. There's a lot to it, and unfortunately, I do not work in biotech, so I have no students who, if they want to come talk about ETFs, we can chat. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I love seeing these things on the agenda, because I think we all know how much time and energy and effort you guys put into this, and so that sort of validation is really important, and so that's thrilled to see that these things are here. Mr. Ruggiero, a question for you. Makes probably the most sense to approve them separately or together?
You can, why don't you do them separately?
Okay.
or not?
I didn't know
One
if
of
it
them
would-
hasn't been,
Yeah.
Desi
It's a
hasn't
funny
been-
situation, and like I said, I didn't really know. It's like, here, but also, but also go fill this out. So
So as I
figured
said,
we were
so
here.
The DESI website that they use for grants,
Yep.
right, it has different statuses.
Sure.
So the last status is I approved it in the system.
Okay.
But it's sitting in DESI's queue.
Okay.
So the 422A grant hasn't formally been approved by the department.
I see.
So if you disapprove both of them
Okay,
separately.
separately.
That's better, yeah.
Okay. Well, with that said, hearing no other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve DESI Grant FC 0436 in the amount of $15,000. Mr. Turner, second. Mr. Samaha, all those in favor?
Heck yeah.
Unanimous. I would also entertain a motion to approve DESI Grant FC 422A in the amount of $35,000. Mr. Ragsdale, second. Mr. Golden, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And to
so
Ms.
much.
Dickerson and Mr. Staff here and everybody that
Yes.
helped out, congratulations.
Great, thank you so much.
Just to let you guys know,
Please.
there's one more grant that the Part B.
Yes.
And that's for about,
Well, it hasn't been posted yet, but
oh, just kidding.
potentially
Julie's already
coming.
spending it.
Shoo-ins.
There is additional funding that we are able to apply for, $75,000 the first year, should you be accepted into the program. And then I think I've seen other schools, $50,000 in subsequent years to help with the funding, the rewriting of syllabi and curriculum, any materials, that sort of thing. So we'll hopefully be coming to you for acceptance on that as
We
well.
look forward to it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. Excuse me. All right, the next item is approval acceptance of $13,197.25 in grants from the Wilmington Educational Foundation, $9,097.25 in curriculum grants, and $4,100 in miscellaneous grants. Is there a motion, Mr. Turner, second by Dr. Bryson?
Discussion?
Please,
I just
discussion.
want to point out the amazing work WEF does. And sitting in on their meetings where they review these, they do go through these in detail and really work to understand what they're all for and all the good that they can do for the students. And their process is fantastic. The work they do is amazing. And they'll be back very soon with more. We are truly blessed with this group and what the support they provide to our teachers.
Agree, and the dollar amount breakdowns, the recipients, and the sort of reason or target for the grants are all in the packet if folks are interested.
And
Please.
one last thing, they're coming up on the 25th of March, the STEM Fair. They, through analog devices through WEF, provides a tremendous portion of the support to fund that event as an example, again, of the work WEF does.
Thank you for that. Mr. Axel.
And I'd also just like to add that all of those grants, I think that there were counted 16 staff members involved in
The effort.
applying for those grants. And so in addition to, just the appreciation to WEF for the time that they spend and the support that they provide, a big thank you to the staff who do the work to find out what our needs are and to write the applications to receive these grants. It's
Wonderful.
much,
Thank
much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, David.
Others? Okay, motion made and second. All those in favor? Unanimous. And again, we'll reiterate our thanks to WEF, to the staff for applying for those grants. That brings us to approval of the 25-26 school year calendar. Is there a motion? Dr. Bryson, seconded by Mr. Samaha. Is there discussion? Please.
I just want to, because we don't get a great deal of public comment, I do want to thank the person who did make public comment for sharing their thoughts with us on this matter. It was very passionate and I think thoughtful and a good kind of sounding board to kind of bounce off of and consider. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Others? Dr. McCaldy.
Yeah, I thought about this some more and just wanted to say I don't think I'm going to be changing my vote on this. So I do feel that the 2 weeks off at the end of the year is too much for the kids to be off of school.
Thank you. Others? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor of the 25-26 calendar? That is Mr. Samaha, Mr. Turner, Dr. Bryson, and myself. Opposed? Dr. McCaldy, Mr. Golden, Mr. Ragsdale. So 4-3, calendar passes. Thank you. That brings us to second read of policy AC, non-discrimination and harassment. Is there a motion? Mr. Turner, second. Mr. Golden, discussion. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And bringing us to warrants, grants 26-27, revolving 48 through 50, locals 75 through 80. Food service, 48, 49, 50, 51, circuit breaker, 19, special education, 44 and 45, and payroll, 3/12/2025. Is there a motion? Mr. Axdale, second. Mr. Golden, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And that concludes our consent agenda, bringing us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just before I get to there is one item under this tonight, but just wanted to go back briefly to the conversation earlier on the grants and dual enrollment. And I want to certainly want to acknowledge the discussion. Ms. Dickerson did follow up a little bit further, Ms. Smaha, around your question. It sounds like there are a few things to consider around dual enrollment. And she pointed this out to me, not only the fiscal piece that was mentioned, also sort of staff onboarding and support of it, number two. And number three, and perhaps most importantly, it sounds like there's, it sounds like the universality of AP courses in terms of their acceptance by higher education, sounds like that's a solid through line. The question around dual enrollment and the acceptance of those courses sounds like that's something that is more uncertain from institution to institution. So it's all to say it's certainly something that they're thinking about, but it sounds like it's a little bit more complex than just sort of jump into. But it's not something that I know an awful lot about, admittedly. That was helpful for me to understand, but I just wanted to close that loop. It's something that I think the conversation's begun on, and probably to be continued for sure. So. The item under the report tonight is an update to the committee on my mid-year progress on the goals that were set at the outset of the school year. I hope it goes without saying that despite my circumstance and forthcoming departure from the district, I am continuing to work hard on and focusing in on the work that we talked together about in the fall, specific to the goals that are mentioned here in the report. So really tonight is just an effort to provide you with a brief update on the work and progress to date. As you'll recall, there were 4 specific goal areas that are outlined as a recap from our discussions back in the fall. The first was around Strategic Initiative 5.1, and communication practices fall under that. School safety planning was goal number 2. Number 3 was a focus on the Wildwood School Building Committee, and 4, the middle school program review. In the pages that accompany the memo, I've tried to highlight some of what I think are the key action steps and progress related to each of those 4 goals. Certainly not my intent to read through those tonight, but just to highlight some of the activity that is underway on each of those goals. We've talked about some of these clearly here in this room and in the meeting. Specifically, as you get into goal number 2, school safety planning, from the safety audit and the various trainings and discussions we've had with our public safety officials in town. We've obviously talked an awful lot about the school building committee, so I don't think need to review that, but tried to highlight some of the different more notable dates and accomplishments that fall under that. And then the middle school program review, there were a number of different areas there. One I point out regarding math and ELA curriculum review. We've got a bit of a delay there. I've talked at length with Mr. Elliott around where that trajectory looks like for that specific piece of that goal. But the No Place for Hate program is underway, thanks to Mr. Faircloth and a number of students and staff from the middle school. So that's great, I think, to see. The Unified Arts Program Review is something that has been started but needs to certainly continue. And then the note around the Culture and Climate Survey, AMLE, Association for Middle Level Education. A few years ago, we talked about that, of course, here at this table, for those of you that were part of the committee then. There's an intent to return to that and to try and provide a refreshed data set around culture and climate. I highlight there the district leadership school visits, not a goal, as I point out, but certainly something that I'm really happy with and pleased as we continue to try and get our district leadership team members into our district and throughout our schools. And then accompanying that is the original document that you saw back in October. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments, certainly respect the fact that it may not be, but as I note on the memo, it's my intent to report out to the committee the middle of May 14th, at your regularly scheduled meeting then, a final report on these goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. And I will say, just as a brief addition to that, just Dr. Bryson and I met with Dr. Brand last week or earlier this week. I don't recall now. Anyways, and the thought process or the thinking behind this sort of is that, it's unfair to Dr. Brand to not to review his progress through the past year. Also, it's a requirement for the school committee to conduct a review of the superintendent, and it sort of establishes a baseline for us for where we are, both for an interim and then further out a permanent superintendent. So the idea is for the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee to meet sooner rather than later, review the document, and provide the committee with what will essentially be a slightly shorter, abridged version, God bless you, of the review that we can complete for Dr. Brand. So with that said, if anybody has any questions for me or Dr. Brand. Mr. Turner.
Quick one. So, thank you very much for the summary. The middle school and the No Place for Hate program, we had a very good presentation earlier from the middle school students. Actually, it was one of their monthly reports. But part of that program was some student-led activities in the school.
Yes.
It'd be really, I think, good for us and for the community to hear how those go and how they play out through the year, and how they're received. It was one of the portions of that program that sounded most impactful.
Yep.
As opposed to teacher-led, student-led. I know
Absolutely.
part of that is the Humans of Wilmington Middle School Subcommittee, but I think there was more to that as well. So hearing more about that would be really, really helpful.
Well, certainly, and I think, and you're right, and things are in the works. I know that in conversation with Mr. Faircloth, but certainly something that we can take a look at what that looks like from a calendaring standpoint to have them be back before you, regardless of these goals. But it was a great program. It's something terrific and to be proud of for the middle school community, and I think us as a school district and school community. So I appreciate the reminder about that. Yep.
And then the only other one was on the district leadership visits. Is there a way to encapsulate the learning, particularly from your perspective, to be handed off to the future leaders so that we can take what you've gotten out of that? Because I think it was a very important goal of the way, and some of that was peer-to-peer sort of discussion, but also your interaction with that process. To be one of the things that's handed off. I mean, obviously, there's going to be millions of different things that are part of the handoff and the transition, but I think capturing the value of the time that was spent on that would be a useful deliverable from you to your successor.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
Mr. Exo.
Also connected with the middle school review, and I was really pleased to see the details that you provided in there. I think that I would like to see, I think before the end of the school year, I would love to see Mr. Kyra come and talk to us about kind of just the road ahead and the progress that has been made. I know that we've, in the past couple of years, we've talked a lot about the schedule changes and about the wind block and adaptations that have been made there, and clearly there's still work going on there. But, this has been, a major focus of the committee for several years, and not to spoil old business item 9A, but now that Mr. Kyra is appointed the permanent principal of the school, I think that I think it would be appropriate for him to come before the committee and just talk a little bit about where things have been this year, the progress that's been made, and what we're looking forward to next year.
If I can, I think that's a terrific suggestion. I'll point out that we do have on the calendar the presentation of the school improvement plans from all of the schools, inclusive of the middle school, of course, and Mr. Kyra will be a pivotal part of that. But I think what you're reminding everyone of is to the point of that this has been a huge focus, obviously, and a lot of conversation around here. It's not just as simple as a new principal moving into the permanent role, and what does that look like, and what has that journey been. But I also am thinking, though, that the timing of that, I think, could be aligned nicely with that AMLE Culture and Climate Survey. That's not a survey that's been put into place yet, but I really like that as an opportunity to provide some baseline comparison from where the school community was a couple of years ago to now. And I think that's something that would be, in my opinion, really, really important for Mr. Kyra to speak to, and then to use that as a foundation upon where to help take the school in the near-term future. So we can absolutely make that happen. And maybe it's not part of the school improvement plan presentation, but maybe a subsequent presentation. I think it would be important for everyone to hear. So thanks.
I was going to suggest when we met for the agenda review that we invite Mr. Kyra, so thank you for the suggestion. Others? Mr. Samar.
Yeah, I just want to add something, sort of going off of what Mr. Turner was saying is, I think, as a committee, I think we have to have some discussions about some of these goals and what the carryover is going to be like to the next to our next leader. And I just feel like I want to mention that, so that can be at the top of the front of our minds here, as we move into the spring.
Thank you. Good point.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brand.
Thank you.
That brings us to item number 7, public comment. We did receive several written public comments, which were in the packet. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Hearing none. That brings us to new business. The first item of new business is the student cell phone use preliminary report and update. Dr. Brand and Ms. Brown, come on down. Thank you for being here and for waiting patiently.
As Ms. Brown takes her seat, there's an item that accompanies this in the packet for members of the community who might be watching and are interested to learn more, but just very briefly, and I'll certainly turn it over to Ms. Brown, and also point out that we have a couple of members of this committee, Mr. Ragsdale and Mr. Golden, who of course have also been an instrumental part of this work. So a number of months back, we set out to focus specifically on student cell phone as a topic here in our community, something that, as I pointed out before, is not a focused effort that we have undertaken. We know, we're seeing this in the news a lot, we understand that a number of other districts are starting to, or have taken some time to sort of peel back the layers of this onion and try and best situate themselves in terms of where they want to be relative to policies and procedures and expectations. With all of that, work has been underway. You can see in the memo the many stakeholders that have been active participants in this work. I just want to pause to thank them for their time and their energy and support of this. Number of staff members, student representative, parent guardians, Mr. Gendron from our principal group, I mentioned our school committee representatives, and Aaron Dunham. Aaron could not be here this evening, but has been great in terms of trying to lead and coordinate this work. So tonight is meant to give you an update, an insight in terms of some of the work to date and where the project's going. So Becky, thanks for being here, and thanks for speaking on behalf of the committee.
Yeah,
To start us off.
I just have a couple my perceptions from being on the committee. I think the stakeholders have worked so well together. I think we all kind of came to the table, or I'll speak for myself, we all kind of came to the table with maybe an idea of where we thought this was going, but everyone has been very respectful and has really listened to each other and has kind of just really looked at the environment and has been very open about that. As we started this, we did kind of get a gift from the Attorney General because they did put out the toolkit, so I think that really laid the foundation for some of us that we had all on our own, had kind of done some research and had Googled different things and had looked at different school districts to see like what they were doing, but then definitely I feel like the Attorney General kind of gave us something with some really good information. We have spent a lot of time with the surveys. We have tweaked them and retweaked them. I think that when we do look at the results, and the results, we are getting large numbers, so the data will be good, and I think it will be clean. Everybody kind of had time to look at those surveys, and I think that the questions are going to give us the data that we really want. I think one of the things that came up in our groups is that the teachers are really looking for some kind of guidance. That a lot of them feel like they're kind of caught in the middle every day about needing to use phones at times for classwork, but then other times the phones are out and they don't need to be out. And obviously every teacher is an individual in how they teach their class. So from classroom to classroom, it's different. And so I think that teachers are really struggling. So I think that we heard pretty clearly that teachers would like us to give them some guidance around this. And then the other thing that came out, and I think that this was Lisa Federici, who's at the middle school, gave us some good insight about middle schoolers and their use of the phones, as opposed an 8th grader as opposed to a senior. And there's some real concerns about middle schoolers needing to still develop socialization skills, that they shouldn't necessarily have their phones at lunch. Like they haven't developed skills to talk to each other. Whereas maybe when you get into a junior and a senior level, they have developed those skills maybe. So that if we're looking at a policy, maybe it won't be straight across the board. It may be differentiated by grades. And then the other thing that I just have to, in every forum that I have an opportunity, Jackson Kiley is one of our juniors who's been on the committee, and I just cannot, I don't know the kid, so it's not like he's my kid or anything like that, but I just have to say that when we think about the vision of the graduate, this is Jackson Kiley. Like, he has come on this committee basically as the student representative, and he has been so mature and has articulated his thoughts from the student perspective, and I just have been so impressed with him, so.
Thank you. Yeah, Jackson presented last year a couple of times as part of the student representative. And he's a great young man. So
Yeah, and I just, he's put some really good insight out there for us as administrators and teachers to think about. He's been also very open-minded, and I understand when I look at the student involved in this cell phone policy that Jackson is like right up top, and that we have other students that aren't at the maturity level that Jackson is. So when we think about cell phone use in our schools, like, we have to kind of look across the board. But yeah, he has been I feel like he's been very impressive.
Thank you. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, and thank you, Becky, for being here and for, I think, capturing a lot of what we have talked about on the committee. I admit it's been a lot of it's been a long process, and so sometimes I've lost the narrative, but you did a really good job of capturing that. And I was laughing because the first thing I was going to say is that I also was so taken with how impressed I was with Jackson. Did a great job. We were in a couple breakout rooms, myself and Mr. Ragsdale, with him, and I thought he did a great job of kind of shouldering being a voice for an entire student population in a really mature way that also was pretty circumspect with regard to policy having purpose and then the students having things they obviously want. I think for me, kind of to what you were saying, those are the two biggest points for me. Is I really strongly believe we need to come out of this with a clear set of guidelines for teachers. I think putting them in this kind of gray area is a non-starter for me. I think any policy we decide on needs to be really just like give them what they need, so this doesn't get in the way of them doing the teaching they want to be doing, A. And then B, yes, I do think that it's almost funny. I was almost going to bring this up as a tie-in to the middle school we were just talking about, because to me, like, one of the things that actually came up in this is whether we need to revisit kind of in the future some staffing items with regard to computer science and health and how those interact at the middle school, and whether we want more curriculum specific to mental health and technology, because so that could be kind of an outgrowth of this policy. But I found it a really productive and important thing, but I think we need to see what the survey data says and then probably use the AG's toolbox to then pick one of those, because again, they did a great job, as you said, of presenting us with some this, that, or the other thing. But I do think that we need to set some strict rules in place, and probably stricter at the middle school than at the high school.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Turner, excuse me, and then Mr. Samaha.
First of all, thank you very much, and thank you to all who've taken part in the committee, particularly the parents and the staff, and obviously Jackson. The staffing piece is part of where I started with this whole thing, was the idea that teachers have so much asked of them. And across all of the grades, it's different, but the volume of things that we ask them to do, and then to layer on management of, handheld technology that can be so disruptive, it feels like a tremendous burden. And I know, to the point you made, some teachers do like to use it as a useful tool in parts of teaching and learning. And so being nuanced about what we come up with, but being clear. And so nuance can be across grades or could be across schools, but being really crystal clear with what was expected of the students, what's expected of the teachers and the parents, I think is really, really important. And I really hope we're able to come up with some really good guidance out of this. I do think that at the end of the day, the single biggest thing to any implementation will be parent alignment. Because if a child comes home and the parent says, well, you can ignore all that, then none of it will be effective. And so I think having parental buy-in and having parental support will be fundamental to actually having it work. But the day where teachers don't have to worry about telling kids to put away their phone or turn their back to do something at the whiteboard and have to, I think that'll be a very good day when it's something that's more manageable for the teachers. Thank you.
And I think that the students that are here now, their parents have never parented without their kids having a cell phone. Like, my oldest daughter is 35, and my youngest is 27. My kids didn't have cell phones, so there was no communicating throughout the day. And I know at some point that's probably important, but somehow I was able to say, it's not me picking up you, it's, another girl's parent on the basketball team or something like that. And I think that true emergencies can certainly go through the main office. It's just a true emergency. But I do think that this generation of parents have learned to parent using cell phones. So what if we change that their child will not have a cell phone from 8 o'clock to 2:35, that will be a change for some parents. And I also think that some parents will welcome it, that they don't want to constantly be feeling like they have to communicate with that their child is reaching out to them and they feel obligated to answer that text. So I think that some parents will be relieved in a way, but others will definitely struggle some.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to everybody who's working on this. I think that, and I'm glad, Mr. Golden, to hear you say that we need to have a very clear policy. Because I know as a teacher, while Boston Public Schools has a district-wide policy, it differs, it's all over the place. Unfortunately, my high school does not have a consistent policy, and so it's different from classroom to classroom. And when you put that, like what you were saying, Mr. Turner, when you put that responsibility on teachers, it can ruin or it can harm relationships that teachers have with parents, with students. If you have to communicate about a student who's using their phone at the wrong times, I think that I think we need to be clear and have the teacher not be the person who has to be the enforcer of the rule, that they can say, it's not my rule, this is school-wide policy. I think that is critically important at both the high school and the middle school. I know that there's an idea, I do it as well because my students have phones, there are some educational purposes for it, but I also think as a one-to-one district, all of those things that you can do on a phone educationally could probably also be done on a Chromebook. And I think parents need to understand that cell phones can be such a disruptive part of the of learning if there isn't good policies and good enforcement, and they might not necessarily like it, but in my opinion, it's doing damage to classroom learning environments. Even if it's not your kid that's on the phone, if it's a couple other kids, they're now missing out on that whole experience, and it lessens the experience for everyone. So I'm really glad that this is being pursued in this way, and I really hope that a clear policy can come out of this. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McCauley, and then Mr. Exo.
Yep. So thanks for coming by and giving us the update. Just a quick question. What's the timeline for authoring a draft policy? And then will that policy come to this committee, or does that get approved by another body?
Good.
So I think we thought we were going to wrap up quicker than we are, because we are now we're adding additional meetings on, because I think as the work kind of evolved, we kind of realized that we had to do some background research, look at the Attorney General, we had to have discussions, so like now we're at the point where we have these surveys and people are completing them, so I think that maybe our initial timeline was maybe not as realistic, and so I think once we get the data and we look at the surveys and we look at the data, then we can kind of decide what direction we want, and it will be supported by survey data.
Yep.
But just
Great to hear.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dr.
I was just going to say, the timeline may be extended a little bit. It was originally wrapping up, I think, in March, so it's extending out. But it has always been my thought, and remains so, that whatever comes out of this group as a working group as a recommendation does indeed come to this committee.
Okay.
And that would then certainly need to be, a conversation amongst the committee, whether it emerges as sort of a set of expectations that finds its way into student handbooks. That obviously still is something ultimately, at least at the high school level, middle school level, are handbooks that you approve. And/or if it's part of policy, that's something larger and a formal school committee policy, then that's obviously something you can approve. So
Sure.
It's always been my thought that either way, as a school committee and governing body, you absolutely should weigh in on the ultimate position of which direction this goes, whether it's one or the other or both. I suppose that could be as well too, but that's been my thought. So even this delay pushes that out a little bit, but I still think with plenty of time to land this and the direction that we're going as a school community well in advance of the end of the year, to be able then to communicate that to families and then be ready to go come the return of school in the fall.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Ragsdale.
Yeah, so I think that the way I understand where we're going from this point forward is that the next meeting we want to have will review the data, so we're going to wait for a little bit of time for the surveys to close and for the data to be collected, so that we can look at that data, and then have at least one more meeting after that to actually kind of like talk about what recommendations we're going to make, and put together a document that comes before the school committee with the recommendations of the working group. And adding on to what people have said before, it has been a really thoughtful process, working with all the different stakeholders. And, there's disagreement on the committee. Not everyone, comes in with the exact same point of view on it, which of course is good, because if you all initially think the same, then you're probably missing some key aspects of the whole question and the whole issue. But to come back to what's already been mentioned, the one thing that everyone agrees with 100% absolute consensus is that no one wants teachers to have to be the cell phone cops. So that is kind of one place where there was, from the start, 100% agreement that whatever policy we come up with has to be clear and understandable, and something that doesn't leave just a whole bunch of discretion and wiggle room where teachers have to be constantly trying to police cell phone access or use in the schools.
Sure. And if I'm not mistaken, the survey ends this Friday, is that right?
Or 10th.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. I think that's what Aaron told me.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, you had your hand up.
So, yeah, the one follow-up thing to the timing piece, the only caveat I would give to having it done by the end of the year to roll out into the fall is if the survey data comes back and it is very mixed bag, which we experienced on one of our other topics a few years ago, and the committee is not able to come to, this is obviously what we should do, I would rather take another cycle, another whatever, to get to something we can all know that is going to be the best thing for the teachers, the students, and the parents are aligned with, than push out something that isn't aligned. So if we get to that, I would, that's my personal preference. And so in terms of the timing, I could see a delay being necessary for that one reason. I would certainly love the sooner the better, to be clear, but I would rather have something that's really effective and really enforceable and really useful than something that fails for whatever major sort of reason.
Yeah, I think we'll get a sense from the working group probably, if not at our next meeting, then the one after that, so.
Thank you.
Dr. Bryson, you had your hand up.
I do. So thank you, and I'm excited to see what comes to us next time. I noticed, so Ryan Gendron is on this group, and so I'm trying to think in terms of what this might look like with rollout, and so he's the only administrator. Is that correct?
The only principal.
On this,
Only principal.
Only principal. And so if this were to be rolled out, I'm assuming this would also affect the middle school. And so there's no administrator from the middle. And so I guess has that posed an issue? Or is Ryan kind of speaking for principals at large? Is he, I mean, because I would imagine there's some, and do you have to share, I mean, you don't have to share this, but I just want to make that point, because as I'm looking at this list, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because this is going to be, I would imagine, as a parent of a high schooler now, but at the middle school level, I would imagine it's going to be a little bit tougher there to navigate a policy or a set of, conditions, and it's going to be harder there than I imagine it's at the high school. I mean, as a high school parent, I don't actually find that the cell phone is nearly the issue now that it was in those earlier years. So I'm just curious to know, sort of, is Ryan, well, I'd love to almost hear from him, but I mean, I'm also thinking more specifically about the middle school and what that might look like, and will there be this sort of buy-in because they haven't necessarily been a part of this whole thing?
Yeah, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Dr. Bryson. I'll say, and I think this kind of gets as well to what I think Becky was saying with regard to how the process has shifted, or the conversation. We need more meetings because the global nature of this problem has kind of been made known to us on this committee. So I'll be very open to telling Mr. Kyra to join this working group, because I do think you're right. I think we need that explicit middle school voice, and that's all she wrote.
Mr. Reiser.
I think that Mr. Gendron has been mostly giving us his perspective and just experience at the high school level, but there have absolutely been conversations in the larger committee about how this might look different at the middle school, or the middle school will raise different issues. And we have, while not a middle school administrator, we do have middle school faculty, and we have middle school parents on the committee. And so that has been acknowledged, that this might not look the same, or might not have all the same challenges at different schools in the system.
Well, and perhaps, and not to sort of upset the balance you guys have already come to, but now that breaking news, Mr. Kyra has been permanently made the principal at the middle school.
Wait, what?
An invitation to, you guys are gonna meet again, no pressure, but maybe if he can, it might make sense to get him into those conversations now. So just something to think about. Mr. Turner.
Sorry, I apologize. I should know this, but I don't. Any of the parents or teachers for grades 4 or 5? Because presumably, I mean, we're talking about middle school and high school primarily, but there's a vast number of folks that are at 4th and 5th grade who are acquiring phones.
We definitely have parents of elementary students.
Okay, thank you.
That kind of came up, like, not initially, but as we have had discussions, like, if you have a cell phone policy, like, are we talking grades 6 through 12, or are we really talking grades 4 and 5 too? Like,
Why are you looking at me?
I thought you had your hand up.
Oh, no.
I knew
Sorry.
at the school committee meeting.
No?
I was gonna say, and I think, again, this really brings up, we're kind of living in miniature.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. We're living in miniature the exact process that has happened in the working group. Is as you talk about this, you realize the holistic nature of talking about cell phones, right? I mean, kids, get your iPad kids who've been looking at a screen since they could look at a thing, right? So, I mean, some kids are very cell phone oriented, even as young as 9 years old, and some don't have a cell phone until they're like 14, right? So that's why we're getting the survey data. That's why it's important that we consider adding maybe another administrator, maybe from the middle school. But yeah, these are great questions. Thank you.
and just as a little aside, this came up in the last meeting, was we asked Jackson what he thinks when he sees a teacher on a cell phone, and it was interesting to get his response. Was the teacher using it for their personal reason, or were they doing something for their position? So it was kind of, if we put in a cell phone policy, how does that impact our teaching staff?
Interesting.
Dr. McCauley, Dr. Bryson.
Sorry, that really resonated with me, what you just said there. So I know in my personal life, like in my working career, a lot of no cell phone policies and meetings, no laptop sometimes too, because it's kind of a sign you're not paying attention, right? You're not showing respect to the speaker, to the meeting, to the group, and everything like that. So yeah, I think that's a thread worth pulling for sure. So thank you for bringing that up.
So Dr. Bryson and then Mr. Ragsdale.
And I just think about since this work has started, I mean, we've been thinking about this for years now, but since I've been reading more and more about it, my own behavior has changed in terms of, I think sometimes with parents, there's this, oh, I just saw this cool thing, I'm going to share it. Not thinking, like, I had read an article, it's like, that means there's like a buzz in the child's backpack, right? Like in my college student's backpack, because I saw something that I thought was kind of it, and I was like, ooh, Hannah would love this, I'm going to, and now I stop myself, and I'm like, oh, nope, class ends at this time. And so I'm being a lot more aware of my own behaviors, because I think those of us who aren't necessarily teaching in class, I mean, in classrooms that I'm teaching, I never have my phone out. But I'm only teaching for 3-hour chunks, right? And so then I'm checking. And so for me, it's sort of like, oh, I can share this real fast. And I try to be a lot, but I think that's I mean, I'm learning about this too. And I think families are gonna have to say, we will not message our children during the school day. Like, that's a hard, but I feel like almost that's what I needed to tell myself. Maybe that's not what it will be. But for me as a parent, I'm like, okay, 2:35. Like, that's when I feel like it opens up again. And because it's a buzz, a distraction. You know, you feel it when you're having a conversation with someone. If I'm doing something and someone takes out their phone, you automatically feel like, oh, they're not listening any longer. So I think, what are we teaching our kids? And I'm sure this has all come up in those meetings, but I'm just excited to kind of, not just about what's the rule gonna be, but the bigger picture of how do we feel about teaching our kids how to use this in a way that's really going to help them be active citizens, right? Good friends, good colleagues in the world that we live in.
Thank you. Mr. Axel?
And in the discussions about the sort of the faculty use, it was immediately recognized that there are times when staff are using their phones for educational and school-related purposes. Like, so the staff in the group immediately were just like, well, sometimes we have to contact such and such, and there's no other good way to do it. And everyone kind of immediately saw this idea that, like, well, it's like, we're not going to put in any kind of rules for faculty in the same way as for students about phones, but that this is something that really needs to be dealt with norms. That faculty staff can still be mindful of their cell phone use, about where they're doing it, when they're doing it, how it looks to other students, and so forth, even if there ultimately is, a good purpose for it. And that broadly is something, and this kind of gets to what Dr. Bryson was just talking about. One of the main sections, there are 3 main sections in this toolkit put out by the Attorney General titled Cell Phones and Social Media in Schools, if anyone wants to Google it. But there's a whole section on community norms, that it's not just about having model policies or having a bell-to-bell policy, that on some level you need to just instill this kind of community norms around electronic use and social media use, and it's just if it's a lot easier to make things like this work in schools if there's a larger sense in the community that this is also an important topic and something that people care about, and that that it's not just the schools doing this, because obviously in so many areas it's like we need our families to reinforce what we're doing in schools in order for this partnership to be successful.
Thank you. I do want to move us on, but, and I don't need an answer to this, but just as we're talking about it and thinking about it, talking about cell phones makes me think also, AirPods, Bluetooth headphones, smart watches, like the things, the attachments essentially that come with smartphones too. So I hope that the conversations, if they haven't, I'm sure they have, but if they haven't, would sort of go towards that, at least for some direction for those as well.
Yeah, and at the elementary schools in particular, that was
Right.
brought up, because there are a lot of families who will, get their kid a certain kind of smartwatch. They don't want them to have a cell phone yet, but they still have a way to text them, and so that has to be addressed.
And we
as
did
well.
have Ken Lord
Addressed
come
as
and
well.
kind of enlighten all of us on the committee about different aspects of not having a cell phone, but also like having devices and how students may potentially work their way around the policy.
How they can use their Chromebooks for sneaky purposes, even if they don't have phones.
You can have the last comment.
Because sorry, I knew you want to move this along, but to tie to something Mr. Golden said, but also previous conversations we had with Ms. Elliott and Mr. Lord about just the general technology, how much is appropriate with any device in the teaching environment at different grades, the right ways to use, because there's phenomenal ways to use technology, but also just having the Chromebook always out opens the door to other issues. And so being thoughtful as maybe a phase 2 of, or a continuing effort with the curriculum side of it to how and when for technology, but also how and when for what we teach the children in the middle school about, we have technology in the middle school already, but more angled towards social emotional ties to technology, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give you a chance if you want to wrap us up, but Becky, I don't know if you are planning to or if you would mind, our next agenda item is new policies, and we have administering prescription and non-prescription medications. So if you don't mind hanging out just for a second in
Yep.
case there are questions, but do you have anything on cell phones?
I think it's all been said.
As he takes out his phone to check.
No, it's a clearly important topic, clearly be continued, and thank you for your feedback. Thank you, Becky, for speaking to that tonight.
Thank you to all involved. I appreciate it. So it will move us along to the first read of new policies, and I'm taking these out of order so we can be mindful of Becky's time. But the first one now will be policy JLCD, administering prescription and non-prescription medications to students. Mr. Exel, I don't know, do you want to talk us through this? I admittedly missed the beginning of this meeting, so I missed the discussion about this policy. But David, do you want to start?
I mean, I'll leave it to Becky to do most of the description, but this is, if I recall, it was almost entirely just pulling this policy in line with current regulations from the DPH.
Yep.
Okay.
So this actually should have, and this is on me, when I came in, it was COVID, and I didn't really realize this, because of the importance of this policy, should really be reviewed every 2 years, so I'll be on top of it from now on. But when I have to renew my credentials every 3 years in order to get the registration, in order for the school nurses to be able to give medications. And so in the part of that is to review the policy to bring it to you. So I did try to clean up the language. The very first part is just aligning it with Mass General Law. Needed to document how nurses actually document medication. We have, for years, we've been using electronic documents, so I included that. I did need to include alternative therapies, homeopathic and vitamins. That is considered in a school setting, is also considered, needs a physician documentation. So I added that. I think one of the, how to document errors. We didn't have that. So if a nurse does have a nursing, have the medication error, how that is reported out. And then field trips have become, medications on field trips have become quite the topic. Actually, this is a topic at the state level right now, so I think I will probably in the fall be bringing back new changes to Mass General Law. And I think, Mr. Smaha, you had a question about this. So a couple things. We can train being the verb there. We can train our unlicensed staff to give EpiPens. Basically, we're training them on the physician's order, and it's for known allergies. So it's for kids that have bee stings or allergies to food. It is not for an unlicensed staff person to give an EpiPen to someone with an unknown allergy. We delegate medications to some of our unlicensed staff who are willing to take the delegation course. To my knowledge, right now in the district, there is only one staff person who is delegated, and that is one of our teachers in the post-grad program. She can give, under Mass General Law, she can give one of our students who are out in the community every day a medication that requires no assessment at all. It's given the same time every day. She comes into the health office. We transfer one dose of the medication from our locked cabinet into a labeled container that she carries, and she administers it to that student. So there is confusion around training an unlicensed personnel and delegating, and we cannot delegate in schools, so we can't, that staff person, if she's in the building and they don't go out that day, she does not give the medication. That student comes to us. So delegation is only if they are out of the building, and within the state of Massachusetts, we cannot delegate across state lines. We cannot delegate, obviously, for any of our international field trips. So that has become a little more complex. our teaching chaperones who do the trips to Germany and Galapagos Island and everything like that. I review the field trip forms. I make sure they're thorough. I encourage families to go back and add additional information. I have given to Mr. Gendron talking points when the chaperones have their meetings with the parents around medication. So that's the difference between, I think your question was training and delegation.
Yeah, I mean, part of what my question, it was kind of about like was that, as well as you bring up the part about the international trips, right? We see a lot of these. So a student who needs to take a medication, it goes on one of these trips. Are they
So they have
allowed to keep it for themselves?
Yes, so they self-carry, they self-administer the field trip, the permission form. One of my talking points when the chaperone has their parent-guardian meeting is, it is incredibly important to disclose all the medications that your child is on. This is not a time to be worried about confidentiality. You're trusting your child to go to Germany or wherever with our teachers. This is not the time not to disclose that they're on medication for depression or anxiety or a mental health diagnosis, because if that child comes to breakfast one morning and they are very sedated, and you look at the permission slip and it only has ibuprofen, that's a problem. So one of the talking points that I say to the teachers is, please stress with these parents to disclose everything, because it's important. And I know that I think that parents feel that when their child is in Germany, it's okay because someone can text me. Like, we rely on texting, not necessarily. The other very strong talking point is if your child's on a prescribed medication and the trip is 8 nights away, I say 8 plus 2 extra doses. Do not send that whole vial of 30 pills. Put 10 in the vial that's labeled from the pharmacy and take the other 20 and do whatever you want in your own home, but only send whatever number of days plus 2 in case the child drops it or whatever. EpiPens, I tell the faculty, you check before you get on that bus to go to Logan, make sure that EpiPen is current, that asthma inhaler is current and has doses in it. Inhalers in teenage kids historically will stay in backpacks and sport bags from freshman year until senior year because they basically don't use them, and so they just.
Mr. Samara?
Yeah, just as a question, do you ever run into an issue where the medication is legal in the United States but is illegal in other countries? I know, for example, Adderall, an ADHD drug, a lot of times there are some, I believe in the European Union, I think it's illegal.
Yeah, so that's
you
why
guys
we
take all that,
have it.
They have to list it out.
Yeah, we have
And
it.
so that's like, I think, really important for parents to know.
Yeah.
That's a really common medication in the United States, but other countries, it's,
Right.
it's illegal.
Right.
Mr. Golden, and then Mr. Turner.
Thank you. This, I guess, is a question for you, Becky, but anyone else can answer too, is so I went on a broad program in high school that was, you stayed with a family, and they were kind of in an agreement with the school through some kind of intermediary to be responsible for the child, in that case, me. Do we have programs where we've had that happen at Wilmington High? We've sent kids who've stayed with the family, and how are they incorporated into this permission process?
Dr. Brand, we did that in the fall with the Spanish exchange,
Yep.
correct? Yeah.
So are those parents, when they are welcoming a Wilmington High School student into their home, are they made aware of any of these processes? Like, do we interact with them in any way for our health stuff, or no?
I don't know exactly what our foreign language teachers, like how, because in that situation, they're not all in one hotel, like you
Yep.
mentioned, they're in different homes. So I don't know exactly, but once again, they self-carry, self-administer.
Okay.
And the other thing that is very gray right now in the Mass General Law is that a student who, and this seems like common sense, but it's really not, if they have permission to administer their EpiPen, they also need permission to self-carry, so that will be changed in the new language.
Mr. Turner.
So two things. One is just a structure of the document confusion for me, and the other one is a very particular point. The way the document reads, you go through several paragraphs, then you get to investigational new drugs, and then we talk about field trips, which for me made me feel like the field trip discussion was about investigational drugs, when clearly it's more broad. So this particular policy, I feel like it could use headers and sections and say, just as a way to make it more clear what pieces of the document relate to which other, because sometimes there's two paragraphs that go together, and sometimes the two paragraphs don't go together at all. And I don't know how much discretion we have with MASC guidance on policies, but I feel like this one's not as well organized as some of the others. And I literally, as I was reading it, I had to go back up and say, okay, does that relate to that at all?
I can certainly add headers and.
Yeah, something like that would be helpful. And then the other piece
Absolutely.
is, in that little subparagraph, it says provision shall be part of the plan, but we don't define that there is a plan anywhere else in the document. I'm assuming that means the field trip planning document or something, and so the fact that we say it's part of the plan, but the plan isn't a defined thing, I was confused at least a little bit about that part. I assumed I knew what that meant, but I don't know if we need to be more clear about that particular choice of words and say, provision of medical administration during field trips shall have a plan, and the plan will include these things, or I don't know how that could be reworded, but it didn't feel particularly clear. Thank you. Thank you for all your efforts on this.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so headings notwithstanding,
It's the first read.
yeah, it's the first read, so, yeah. All right, so we'll,
So I can take Mr. Turner's feedback, add it in, and then send it to Mr. Fenley or Dr. Bryson?
usually probably
I
to
think
Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy.
Oh, to Tracy. Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
You're
All right,
very much.
Becky, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
your time. All right, excuse me, going back up to the top, that brings us to policy IKF-A, competency determination. Ms. Elliott, do you want to start this one?
Sure. As you may recall, at the recent school committee meeting, I did the presentation about the competency determination and the requirements from the Department of Education. So based on the guidance we received from DESE, bless you.
Thank you.
And the work that our committee did, we presented this first draft to the policy subcommittee. They made a recommendation of an additional incorporation, which was added here, and at that piece of it that was added was a student may appeal the decision in writing to the principal, so that was an addition from what I presented originally. But this is, other than that, this is consistent with what was presented at that last meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Questions or comments? Mr. Turner?
So a high-level one about this policy, and I understand there's some linkage to the way the legislation and the ballot initiative was written. What happens with students that we have with particularly high needs who in the past had, the MCAS alt and had other alternative ways to get to things that were academically appropriate for them? This competency determination is, I have my own opinions about the whole process behind it, but at just a basic level for certain students, is there any appeal to an alternative approach, any appeal to a different way for them to reach and show competency as appropriate with whatever their overall environment be, whether it's 504, IEP, other more, however they get there? Is there a way to describe at least the start of that process, or are we blocked into this as the only option?
So the language you'll see is, so for example, the first bullet, receive a passing grade in grade 10 English course or its equivalent as approved by the high school principal or designee. So that phrase, or its equivalent, is important to us. We had a lot of conversations about this at the committee as we were planning this, because that would allow for a portfolio of work to represent the mastery of the standards, that would have been accomplished in that course. So the policy itself does not specify that level of detail. However, our internal working documents kind of have that flow chart of just ways that we might go about that under those particular circumstances.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Sama.
Can I just add to that as well? When it was the MCAS alt portfolio, those actually, the vast majority of those actually didn't equate to a competency determination.
Right.
So a student with, severe disabilities who's taking the MCAS alt, they weren't getting a competency determination. They weren't getting a diploma.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
it's very hard to get the CD on it with an MCAS alt portfolio.
yeah, essentially if you're getting a competency determination through the MCAS alt, that means you're doing, they call it a competency portfolio, so it's a different thing. So in some ways, as I read this, maybe it's more likely that a student could earn a competency determination through this process as opposed to the old MCAS process. It might actually open up more pathways. But that is something I think that definitely needs to be considered. So I like having that or its equivalent included in that language. The other thing that sort of like as a higher level part of this too is, when we're sort of moving from MCAS as the competency determination to this, I like this a lot better. I think I was not a fan of the MCAS test. And I think most standardized tests, from the standpoint of them being oftentimes, biased, right, against, for students with disabilities, students of color. And I just want to ensure that this process is going to not do the same thing, right? It's going to be fair, I guess, to everybody. So sort of thinking about, and I know that there's been a lot of work over the past couple of years in aligning curriculum, but I just want to make sure that, in 10th grade, if student A gets this teacher, that grading is not going to be measurably different than another student who gets another teacher. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that stuff.
Yeah, I would say that that's a really good point, because there's, it becomes more subjective. And, but I think the timing is actually really good for Wilmington High School, because Mr. Gendron has led his team, the school and the staff over the last several years to really doing that work, to ensuring rigorous coursework, aligning, what are the expectations for AP, for honors, for CP classes, and looking at grading practices across the grade levels, across the departments, to ensure that there's more consistency and consistency in what it looks like for if a student is allowed to retake or redo work or resubmit work. And so those conversations have been going on for the last 2 years now, and the alignment is much tighter than it has ever been. And so that really allows us to be able to implement something like this with more confidence, knowing that there is that consistency across.
Thank you. Dr. Bryson.
Kind of in that same, thinking kind of similarly, I've been pushing for standards-based for such a long time, because I've been in situations where the grade actually does not reflect the standards that a student is actually showing they understand or they've met.
Right.
And so I guess so I'm seeing grade here, but what I'm thinking of in my mind is the standard. Like as a parent, I'm looking at the standard and I'm going, okay, yep, demonstrated, demonstrated, demonstrated. I want to know at the end of this course they've met those standards. I'm less concerned with the grade. So I'm a little bit, I don't know how else to do it because I know we don't have report cards that are based on standards, but as a parent and as an educator, really what I'm concerned with is are they meeting those standards? Can this child do these things? Not do they have a B? Because a B can mean a lot of things. And so I guess what I'm asking, and I know that Mr. Gendron's done a lot of work in this area, and I don't know, I would just love to hear a little bit more about that in terms of, are we really following that? And can we say that when a child has this grade, that it means they've met all these standards? And can a child actually have a C or D, but actually been meeting the grade level standard? That's where I think about our most vulnerable kids, right? So I'm in this space of like, and I think I'm feeling that same thing of who's going to get hurt here. So.
Yeah, and we had a lot of those similar questions and conversations because, I think that it's a fine line between ensuring we have rigorous expectations, but also being really fair and creating pathways and opportunities that students may not have had, who just may not have been successful with that one-time standardized test, right? So, so we're talking that through, and some of the conversations we're having are around some of our courses that are not your typical CP course, but it might be a course that's really designed for specific learning needs. And we're actually going through, and although this says, for example, that the student must pass the 10th grade equivalent of those courses. Some students might meet those standards in 11th grade. Because their course is at a slower pace, but we're going to accomplish those standards before they graduate. So we're going through that process right now with those programs, mapping out the frameworks. Where are they hitting these standards? In which year of this program are they hitting it? Will they, even if they are not in a traditional college placement class or honors class, will they hit that through this modified class? As a junior, maybe they will demonstrate competency determination at that point in time. So we're doing that work for a lot of those courses that are a little bit more unique right now as we speak. And I know that the department, the CTLs, have done a lot of work with teachers around, again, aligning, but also going back to the frameworks. Are we really hitting those and looking at that as part of the work we do? And I anticipate, particularly if questions are coming up around any students' eligibility, that's where we're going back to and doing that work in the core classes as well. So I think there's more to come, but definitely work is underway.
Can I follow up? Which I think is great. I'm thinking in terms of often, I would gather, there's a standard, but there are multiple assignments that would meet that standard. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be. But I'm saying that a child could do this particular assignment and actually meet that standard, but might still wind up not getting a good grade in the class. I think we need to be really careful and thoughtful, right? In terms of, like, when thinking of early literacy guidelines on all of our syllabi, for example, now we're putting exactly what the guideline is, how we're meeting it. So when we show the state, I can be like, it's happening in class session 1, here's the assignment, here's how I'm assessing it, here it is linked on my syllabus. Like, I'm almost wanting to see that. Like, what's the assignment? Is that actually a standard? Or is that just something we like to do? Or have they already shown you that they can do that? And then why are we assessing it again? I know it's not going to happen overnight, but that is the direction I'd like to see us kind of move in over time.
And I'm a big fan and supportive of that. If you can get higher education to get on board with that at the college level, then it would make high schools and middle schools a lot easier to move to that standards-based approach, because that's where we bump up against is the looking for that GPA, looking for that, so there's some schools do it, it can be done, but there's a struggle with that, sending off our seniors to go on to college without having that same grade report that they're submitting to colleges and applications and that GPA, that's where it gets tricky. So, something to think about, but yes.
I have another response, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold on that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
Mr. Exo.
So I have a lot, but I'll try to be quick. So just a couple of big things. I think we need to add legal references at the bottom. So we need the MGL and the regulatory for this. I think we also want to add in some cross-references to policy IKF, which is the local graduation requirements, which are mentioned at the very top, where it says in addition to the graduation requirements, but we should specifically call out that policy by title. At the end of the first paragraph, it says measured by the MCAS high school tests described in section 1I, administered in 2023. I think we should strike described in section 1I. That comes from MGL, but it only makes sense in the context of the rest of section 1I of that. So it doesn't, without the reference, it doesn't make sense here.
Sure.
So I think we should get rid of that. In the middle paragraph, I think what we've written here ends up being a tautology, because we're saying students who have previously earned a competency determination have earned their competency determination, when you just look at the first part and the last part. And I think what we're trying to say, I would replace after the last comma where it says have earned their competency determination, I would just replace that with something like do not need to satisfy the requirements of this policy, or something of the equivalent of that. But right now it's kind of just tautological. If you've earned your competency determination, then you've earned your competency determination. In the actual standards themselves, so rather the 3 bullet points there, and I don't know, part of which I'm trying to sort of figure about is what belongs here in the policy and what belongs in the handbooks as far as procedures. Because, for example, I don't think that we need to describe everything about the appeals process here in the policy, but I think that one thing we will have to do at the school level, at the high school, is there's going to need to be an actual procedure in place for what does that look like if someone appeals it. Like if someone fails a class, and so they're not going to get their competency determination, then how does that appeal look like? Who is reviewing it? What work is reviewed? Like essentially, I think it looks like a question of whether someone reviews and says, "Oh, actually, we think you passed after all." But there needs to be something that's put down at the procedure level. I don't think that amount of detail needs to be here in the policy, but I did want to flag that. I do want to. I think we should reword the appeal sentence in here. Because it doesn't even describe what decision it might be. I think just something as simple as any student who is denied the competency determination shall have the right to appeal the decision to the principal. But to kind of just tighten that up a little bit in terms of what exactly we would be appealing in the first place, and then the details need to be at the school level. So I've been spending some time with the regulations that are out for public comment, and one of the things that they say is for English language arts, the student must satisfactorily complete coursework in the equivalent of 2 years of high school English language arts courses. And these obviously aren't finalized yet, but I just want to flag that as something that just passing the grade 10 course might not fit with that if that turns out to be final regulatory language. In the middle point about passing grades in algebra and geometry courses, something that's been pointed out at in some of the state level meetings is that some students take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And so that I think that, and maybe I'm being too pedantic about this, but maybe the designee could be the middle school principal, except it's not necessarily the high school principal who would be certifying that. If you take Algebra 1 in 8th grade and then Geometry in 9th grade, that's good, even though they're not both high school courses. So I guess I could convince myself that for that purpose, the middle school principal could be a designee and could do that certification. And then the last point, and this again comes kind of from the regulation, is the regulations split the idea of satisfactorily completing the coursework, which is the language from the law. So that's kind of basically where they say getting full credit in a course. And that's, I think, covered by when we talk about receiving a passing grade. You receive a passing grade, you pass the class, you get full credit for that class. They also define showing mastery as essentially successfully completing a final assessment or capstone project or something of the equivalent. And I think that in our practices, that's part of our process because we have final exams in almost every class. But I think it might need to also be in the policy to not just say receiving a passing grade, but to say something about completing or succeeding like in a final assessment, final exam, or capstone project or something similar. Again, just to make sure that we're ultimately giving a policy that's going to meet the regulations, because these are also ultimately going to be collected by DESE, and on some level they're going to be reviewed, and so it would be good to make sure that we're 100% in line with that. All right, I think that's all. Actually, one last comment, which is just, and this is probably more at the procedure level, but, and we might get some more guidance from DESE about this, but I'm also wondering when I look at this, when do students find out? Like it's obvious with MCAS, like the scores come out and you get your parent guardian report and you know what happened. But in this case, I'm very curious about like when do we formally notify students that they've been certified as having received their CD in this process? That's something we'll have to figure out as well.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
You know you want to.
I do. I have my hand up, but Nick had his hand up first.
Mine is so minor. Well, it's not minor, it's important, but relative to it's a tough act to follow.
Most of the rest of the table has already had a turn, so you.
All right. Well, mine was just, it's, my words are minor, but the public comment was not, which was the parent who was saying, when we do eventually promulgate this out to the public, can we just make a nice handy graphic from the school district that makes this as clear as possible? I wanted to, there you go, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Elliott. So, pales in comparison to, I mean, that was like a sheesh. I was like, that was a great analysis. I was very impressed.
He has accent. He lives in this world.
I was like, oh my God.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Dr. Bryson.
So, can I ask David a question? I'll ask you that.
Through Jesse.
Through the chair. So this final exam or capstone, are we going to have to do that? Because I am not on board with that. Is that going to happen, Chair Fennelly? Can you ask?
You have asked through the chair, Mr. Ragsdale, if he knows.
Because I'm not loving that.
So again, I'll just very quickly read the language. Showing mastery shall mean a student successfully completes, in accordance with the district's grading policy, 1, the final assessment for a course, or 2, a capstone or portfolio project, or 3, an equivalent measure identified in the CD policy. What I'm not entirely sure about is whether that level of specificity has to be in the policy itself. Mm-hmm. The idea here is that going through a course is not the same thing as showing mastery. And so that they wanted, something a little bit just beyond that you got full credit, because there are those two different parts. Like they're basically just coming off the text of the law. This is partly why you don't make law by ballot initiative. But you have those two parts of the law. That one just says satisfactorily completing coursework, and then it goes on to say, and showing mastery of the core subjects. And these are two different things, and they're just sort of trying to figure out how to reconcile them and put them together.
Did he answer your question?
He answered it. Yes. To be continued. Yeah.
Public comments open.
Very good.
Yeah.
Other comments? Sally, do you think you have what you need?
I'm going to wait for Desi. No. I believe so when I check in with the minutes over here to capture that.
And certainly check back in with the subcommittee too, if need be.
I have this marked up as well. I'll send to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have to submit this before DESE release it? I mean,
So I was
What's the
going
wor-
to ask you if I don't know what that timeline looks like. Maybe David does, but I know that we need to get something on a policy set for this school year, for students this school year, and then I would anticipate that we'll be coming back to revise it sooner than later.
Yeah.
And let me just, and thank you.
Yeah.
Because I know this is
Yeah.
messy,
Yeah, it's very messy.
and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, Desi has already recognized that it's like schools need to put something in place for this year, and they're just expected to like do the best they can with the guidance that has been given, and no one is expected especially who has people who haven't graduated for class of 25, no one is expected to like wait for these regulations to go through public comment and be voted on, which might not happen until May, before creating these policies. A lot of it is looking forward to the future. There's like the immediate term, got to put something in place for people who are class of 2025, and then we get to the medium term, people who are currently in high school who need to kind of know what's going on and what kind of coursework they're doing, because people are already selecting courses for next year. And then eventually there's going to be some kind of long-term solution, which will probably be totally different after the sort of the graduation requirement council has its time to do its work.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay. That concludes new business. Moving to old business. Item A, Dr. Brand.
Well, I'll go over 9A. We've talked about it a few times.
Big news.
In all seriousness, in the packet is the memo that went out to the community, but to take the opportunity here this evening to extend congratulations to Mr. Kyra, who, through the finalization of the Wilmington Middle School Principal Search, has emerged as a candidate, and I'm pleased to be able to report that in case there are those that are not aware. Mr. Kyra began his career back in 2010 in Wilmington Middle School as starting as an English teacher before moving into administration in 2020. As you know, he stepped into the interim principal role back late in the summer following the departure of Dr. Quirk. We followed, this is an internal search, obviously, but just as a point of reminder and clarity for everyone, even when we have internal candidates, we work our hardest to follow the very same approach for leadership searches. I think it's important to make sure that our stakeholders and community members have an opportunity to weigh in on these searches. Mr. Armstrong and I are very much in lockstep in terms of how we approach this, and we very carefully, ultimately the central office team, but myself, very carefully review all of the feedback that we receive through these searches. It's an important factor, always will be for these. I think it's critical to keep in mind. So with all of that said, congratulations to Mr. Kyra. He is moving from the interim to the permanent principal, really effective immediately, and will continue his good work that he started in that role. As a result, we are setting out to conduct a search for an assistant principal. He's obviously vacating that. We have an interim in that role right now, but we've started that search. That's been posted, I think it was late last week when that went up. And so we'll continue to focus our time and energy on the leadership at the middle school. So, thank you.
Very good. Yeah, and, extending the committee's congratulations and best wishes to Mr. Kyra. And as we discussed previously, look forward to an opportunity to have him here and hear about some events at the middle school. Mr. Golden, you were first.
I was going to say quickly, I went to a middle school PAC meeting last month, and actually, of course, he was there, and I was really impressed with how we conducted that conversation with parents and with staff, and I think he's got the chops. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, as the parent of two middle school students currently, I think Mr. Kyra's done a great job as the interim, and certainly look forward to him continuing that as the permanent principal. So, Mr. Ragsdale, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on what Dr. Brand said that about the thoroughness of the search, that Wilmington doesn't do half-hearted leadership searches just because we have an internal candidate, even someone who seems to be doing pretty well. We just we do it the right way each time and evaluate all the candidates on on their merits and what they can bring to the position. And so I think that's what should give people confidence that we put the right people in the right roles.
Using that comment as a nice segue, we have an update on the interim superintendent search, and I'll turn it to Dr. Bryson, supported by Mr. Turner.
Sure. So we had our first screening committee meeting this evening, led by Dave DeRuzzi from NESDEC and Andrea, and it went really well. We have a great screening committee, and we are moving very quickly. So our post closes on the 21st. We meet again on the 24th, and we will then decide who we're going to screen, and hopefully get some candidates to you early April.
Yeah, we will have the,
So it's fast.
the interviews themselves would be the 2nd and 3rd of April
Yep.
to get to the narrower list that would come to the committee.
And then they'll come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't know how many, obviously, yet. We don't know how large the pool is just yet, but that will, the screening committee will be working on that pretty diligently over the next few weeks. They have asked for some sort of guidance from all of you about some sort of like things you're looking for. So if you think of a few bullet points and you could just send it to me, I guess just send it to me, so we don't get into any sort of open meeting law, but just send me some ideas, something that's important to you, and then Stephen and I will convey that at our meeting on the 24th.
With the intention of those being somewhat high level, not super precise, because we don't necessarily want to take a candidate who might otherwise be good and say, well, they don't meet that one thing, we're going to throw them out of the pile. But general themes, I mean, as an obvious example, one theme would be experience with MSBA projects, and being the educational leader and focus for that side of it would be potentially something we could note as an example. And then there are obviously all the other topics that are on mine, but we also did highlight to the group in the meeting that this interim position is obviously a one-year position. And so the things that are in the strategic plan are important, but some of them are longer-term goals even as written. And so some of those may not be as high level for the interim as they would be for the permanent when we do that. And some of the more tactical things that we would want an interim to accomplish could be slightly different than how we would write that same list a few months from now for the permanent search.
Great. So send me those thoughts when you have a chance. We did talk with the committee about confidentiality. They all signed off on that, and obviously conflict of interest. So I just wanted you to know that everything is being handled well, and it was smooth. I feel really good about it, and I think it's going to be a good process. So more on that soon.
Great. Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Hearing none. That concludes old business. Subcommittee reports. I think that about does it. Correspondence this evening?
None this evening.
Thank you. Future school committee dates and other notable items. Last minute addition, the World Culture Festival is going to be taking place tomorrow, March 13th, here at the high school in the cafeteria from 6:30 to 8:30. The cost is $5, and it will be featuring over $350 in prizes, food stations, a photo booth, music, traditional dance performances, and a guest performance by Flamenco Boston. So I think that's Tracy on the district website, maybe, or thank you. We also have two items on March 25th, the STEM fair, from 5:30 to 7:30 in the middle school cafeteria, and the next Wildwood School Building Committee meeting, which will be taking place hybrid at 6:30 p.m. March 26th is our next regular school committee meeting at 7 p.m. here in the large group instruction room. March 31st is the Wildwood Elementary School Building Project Community Forum, 6 p.m. here in the large group instruction room of the high school. Also that evening following, I'm guessing, the community forum is the Wildwood School Building Committee's next meeting.
Yes.
April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the Wilmington High School Lamplighters presents Hadestown Teen Edition. Showtimes vary. Information, I believe, is on the district website. Thank you. April 9th, the school committee meets again, 7 p.m. here in this room. April 15th, the Wildwood School Building Committee meets again here in this room at 6:30 p.m. April 18th is no school for Good Friday. Thank you. April 21st, school offices are closed for Patriots Day, which also kicks off school vacation week from the 21st through the 25th. Mr. Turner, how'd we do?
You got it all.
Outstanding.
Best I know.
Hearing no additions to the future school committee dates and other notable items, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Golden enthusiastically. Second, Mr. Samaha, or Mr. Ragsdale, excuse me. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Good night. Thank you.